This is probably the most special amp we'll have on the channel, maybe ever, frankly. I've been after this thing for probably 5 years now at this point. I'm so excited to introduce to you guys the JMI AC10 SRT. And you're going, no, it's not. This is absolutely 100% a JMI AC10 SRT, Super Reverb Twin, but it's in a different cabinet, but it is the factory cabinet. So this thing is super, super rare. If you don't know anything about the AC10 SRT, just a really, really rare model that Vox did not make for very long, made famous by the Doug and Pat show. And basically it's just a super gained up version of the AC10 Twin, which I have here. This is from 1964. This is also from 1964. Again, they made very, very few of them. I've been looking for about 5 years. I've never seen one for sale in that period. This amplifier is also known as the Domino Super Reverb, and you probably never heard of Domino. So I'll give you a little history lesson here. Domino was a little offshoot brand that Vox started in the early 60s as kind of a way to position some of their existing models with modifications to a kind of beginner market, more entry level, if you will. So they made a bunch of different models based around the AC4, which is the smallest Vox model. And then the flagship Domino amplifier was this, the Super Reverb. And basically what Vox decided to do, for the other amps, they're different than the AC4. They've got a bunch of differences. For this, Vox decided, you know what, let's just throw the whole chassis into a new cabinet and call it good. So there is no difference between this amplifier and the AC10 SRT besides the cabinet. And those are super rare. I don't know how many of these were made, but I've only seen a couple for sale in the past 5 years. So it's very, very special. I'm so excited. I love Vox amplifiers. If you guys didn't know that already, check out my 64 AC30 series. I really, really love them. That's my main gigging amp. I've got videos of me playing that live. I'll put that up in the corner if you're curious, but big Vox guy here. And I've had this 64 AC10 for a long time. It's never been on the channel, I don't think. It needs some love, so this will be a future project. Subscribe to stay tuned for that, as well as a comparison of these two models because they're very different. Not just in the head versus combo, completely different circuits, completely different tones, supposedly. So we'll have to compare them side by side. Nobody on the internet, as far as I'm aware, has ever done that. So really, really cool stuff. I can't wait to get into that. So going back to the amp here, again, 1964. I purchased this actually from Retrofret, wearing their shirt here. They did a great job packing it. It shipped from New York to California. Kudos to them. I don't think it needs any work done to it. They said it works. They recapped it. They biased it, etc., etc. So we should be good to go there. But we will throw on the workbench and just confirm. And but the goal is to have some playing on this thing. I'm so excited. I'm rambling a little bit here, so let's go ahead and throw it on the workbench, take a closer look at all the innards, and go from there. Quick look at the handle, classic luggage style. Really cool. And then you can see the elephant skin Tolex a little bit better. Definitely nowhere near as durable as the Vox stuff, but still very, very cool. Here you can just barely see where it says JMI. Now the chassis is actually sagging a little bit over here on this side. Pretty common issue. So it's just barely visible from the front. But it is there. Just a little hidden. Now here's a look at the underside. These two holes here would be for the brackets for a piggyback style connection to the cabinet, just like Fender did in the 60s. And then these feet are added by me. First thing I did, just because the feet are way too small to put it on top of a cabinet with a handle in the middle. So these are my default I put on most of my amplifiers, including my AC30. But yeah, you can see how clean it is. I mean, obviously there's some marks here and there, but very clean. There's a seam line. Pretty cool. And onto the back, it looks extremely clean, just like the rest of it. There is a external speaker out that was added in that is not original. I've already disconnected, or rather removed the jack so we can pull it apart, but that's where that was. And then right in the middle, you can see we've got the little plate here, just like what you see on the Vox amplifiers. The only difference is that instead of saying Vox amplifier on the top, it just says amplifier. So there you go. And you can see the model number. It is DOMSR, Domino Super Reverb. And then you can see the serial number there. Yeah, extremely clean. Not a whole lot to look at back here. You can see the back of the chassis is pretty different from any other Vox amplifier because, well, they didn't have a back of the chassis like this. They had that completely different build setup versus what we've got here. So I can't wait to take the chassis out and check it out. So let's get to it. This is an extraordinarily exciting moment here for me. Cannot wait to open this sucker up. I just want to show the candy panel one more time. Look how clean this thing is. I mean, apart from the replaced power switch, which obviously they mangled a bit when they replaced that, it just looks spectacular. Extremely, extremely clean. And yeah, man, I'm so excited to see the inside of this amplifier. I've already got the back panel off, so we just got to get these 4 bolts here. And here we have it, the JMI AC10 SRT chassis out on the workbench. Pretty incredible. So let's just kind of take a look at this top side here, starting with the transformers. So this one, to me, looks like it's an Albion. It looks very similar to the Albion in my AC30. There's no markings on it. They at times would have like a sticker or something, or sometimes there'll be markings on the inside. So that's not concerning to me. This looks vintage correct and original. Same exact deal with this one. This looks exactly like other photos I've seen of SRT amplifiers. That all looks correct. This was obviously added at a later point and does not look super great. Let me zoom in a little bit so you guys can see. So not the best soldering job here. Don't necessarily trust this too much. I've got a different solution in mind to be able to have access to both outputs. So more to come on that shortly. And we might actually just remove this real quick, just so it's not dangling around on us. Let's go ahead and just do that. Let's get the soldering iron and do our first soldering to this mythical amplifier. And obviously we've got the 3-prong here already done for us. That's nice, good length too. Okay, now we can take a look at everything else here. Starting with the tubes, I took out the longer tubes. So I guess we can start there. They're already written on here by somebody. We'll probably remove that. But the rectifier is an EZ81. 6CA4 is the other name for it. It's a nice Amperex. Zoom out a little bit. And then we've got 2 EL84s. In this case, they are the 6N14 Russian variations. This one you might be able to see it a bit better. So these are, I think, supposed to be a bit sturdier. I don't know a ton about those. And then this amplifier from Vox was supposed to have a 12AX7 and then 3 12AU7s. So this one has a 12AU7 in the phase inverter. No, that's, yeah, phase inverter position. Nice mini watt. Made in Hungary. Another 12AU7. So Mullard 12AU7. And this one should be a 12AX7. Another Mullard 12AX7. Or ECC83. So yeah, a great complement of tubes in this thing. And the sockets all look original to me. They are missing, I don't know, maybe they didn't have that. Yeah, they would have. Like my AC10 has these little kind of clips that hook onto these little lips here. I don't know if you can see that for the, especially the taller tubes. Missing that, but that's very common. And we do have a replaced can cap here. It's a Weber 5050. Look at the transformer a bit better. So everything looks really good. Now, the construction of this amp already feels very weird. So let's flip it over and see what we're working with. Get some wood blocks prepared. And here she is. The mythical AC10 SRT amplifier. And there's a lot to take in here. So I've already seen photos on the inside from the advertisement. But to be honest, I pulled the trigger so fast, I didn't really look at it too closely. Other than, you know, obviously it had been worked on, which is totally fine in my mind. I have no problem with that. But the important bits were original, and meaning the transformers, and it had still the original, you know, coupling caps. And yeah, this thing looks pretty dang good. Lots of clean work done to it as far as I can tell. Ton to take in here. Okay, let me just look at it a little bit further. Let's start on this end and point out the bizarre build of the chassis. So unlike a Fender, which the box is all one complete piece of metal, this piece that goes up and under and all the way around, so it makes kind of a C shape from here to here, is all one piece, and then the sides are two add-ons that are bolted in with those two bolts. And there's definitely some flex there. You can see that. Very interesting. And that's where it connects to the cabinet. That's how it's held in the cabinet. Here we see the super bizarre spring reverb setup. It looks like it's been modified in some way with zip ties. I don't know if you can see that. I'm sure it's extremely fragile just looking at it. Definitely don't want to mess with that. You know, I never really expected to find one with working reverb. They're not really known for, you know, their reverb sounding good. So that does not matter to me one bit, but yeah, we'll be leaving that alone. I'll tell you what, this thing does not feel very sturdy. This feels very, very fragile in comparison to a Fender, for example. This kind of two-piece chassis design is quite bizarre. I don't know if you can hear that or not, but I can easily move this. One thing I do want to note is, and I talked about this in my Vox AC30 series, these tags are extremely fragile, and although this amp's had a ton of work done to it, none of the tags appear to be broken, which is pretty awesome, because that's very common to break them. I broke one myself in my AC30, and I was being extremely careful, so that's good to see that this was at least done very carefully enough to not do that. There's so much going on in this bus wire. I got to take a look at what's all happening here and figure out which tube is doing what. So yeah, we're gonna have to go through this piece by piece and be really methodical. I'm just kind of giving you guys my first glance review of it. We do have a replaced pot on the volume control here. You can see that. I don't see any markings on it. So we'll have to take a look, see if that needs to be replaced or not, but in my first initial test, it seemed okay. Yeah, I think honestly this amp, it could use some love. For sure, just to clean it up and get it more up to my standards, but there's nothing catastrophic in here that I really see, you know, apart from the 3-prong wiring. It's pretty good overall. Clearly somebody took their time and cared enough to not break any of the tags. It's, you know, it's had a recap job done pretty well. I mean, I'm pretty happy with this, to be honest. I wasn't exactly sure what I would find. You know, it's hard to see in photos. I could see work was done, but having it in person is obviously a big help. And I'm not upset at all what I see here. The other pots, too, it's worth mentioning, look identical to what are in my AC30, where they don't have any markings on the shell itself. They got a little sticker on the front that you can't really see and usually falls off over time. That tells you what the pot is. So these three look original. This has been replaced, and this one looks original to me as well. Awesome. Okay, I am so excited to have this amplifier and confirm it's healthy and rock the crap out of it. So yeah, we're going to go ahead and stop here. I'm going to do a bit more digging, see if I can find a schematic and start sussing everything out and put together a game plan on what needs to be done to get it going and then what should be done over time. So we'll come back in a minute. In order for us to test the amplifier, we're going to have to hook up the speaker outs here so we can plug it into something. And instead of using what was in there, which was this whole rig that you guys saw connected to the 8-ohm like this, we're just going to ignore that entirely, and instead I built this just little ABS project box with the 8-ohm and 16-ohm, and then this will be in the cabinet using an existing hole in the cabinet itself. I'll show you guys when I install it. But yeah, so we'll have these two. We got the grounds tied to each other. So we just got to run one wire from here to one of the grounds, and then 8 ohm to this one and 15 ohm to this one. And yeah, this will be our speaker out. So we have both outputs. So we'll go ahead and desolder this. We have a fresh starting point, get all the old solder off, make sure it's really strong connection, and then we'll add in the new wire. So we'll go ahead and do the ground connection first here. I desoldered more of the original solder on there just so I could get a really strong connection with a slight hook around the original wire as well. Great, so that'll be super sturdy, really solid. I'm using this really nice, was it PTFE wire? I can't remember what it's called, but it's very, very nice, high quality wire. All right, that looks good. These are very, very solid. So now we can go ahead and twist these together. Grab the drill. So I'm not sure how long I actually need this just yet. So I'm gonna have to grab the cabinet so we can do a little test fitment and see what's what. You guys won't be able to see anything, but that's okay. I'll fill you in once we're about done. And here is the finished product. So nicely wrapped together, and then we've got the box itself. So you can see I've got the white going to the 8 ohm here. We've got the two commons tied together, the black common right here. And then we've got the red for the 15 ohm. I wrote 16, but same difference. And yeah, and then we've got just a cover for it to lock it up like so. And then in the cabinet itself, there is an existing hole in the bottom. That was for mounting the piggyback mounting brackets to connect it to the cabinet. And so we're just going to use that super, super simple and nice clean way to have it all kind of secure. And it's also long enough so it's out of the way. If I need to work on the amp, it's not too cumbersome or annoying. It's not perfect, but it's better than nothing without me having to modify anything, more permanently. So yeah, that's it. So we can go ahead and now turn the amp on and test it and not have to worry about that. So now that we've got the junction box to be able to have output from the amplifier, I wanted to go ahead and measure the bias on it. And with 119 volts from the wall, it's what I'm getting from the wall right now, we're actually biased a bit cool. So we had 264 volts from the plate to the cathode. And then we had the bias resistor measured, let's see, 133.4. This guy right here, so it's 135, measured 133.4. There's two tubes sharing the cathode resistor, and then the voltage across the cathode resistor was 9.85. So we put that all into the Rob Robinette tube calculator, or bias calculator, excuse me, and you can see we're getting about 9.2 dissipation per tube, 9.2 watts, which is 76%. We should be at 100%. So this is a bit of a conservative resistor value here, at least on US voltage. So I know this amp was previously serviced in the UK, and I'm sure that's part of it. It's got something to do with that. So we're definitely going to want to drop this down to maybe a 120 ohm or something in that range, I'm guessing. I just got done going through the entire amplifier component by component and comparing to the best schematic I could find online of the AC10 SRT to really just make sure, there's no hidden mods done to the amplifier and that all the replaced resistors are the correct value in the correct place because, you never know what the previous guy did. So I wanted to really be thorough and check it all and then also figure out a game plan of what we need to do, what parts we need to order, all of that. So let me go ahead and pull it up on my phone and show you guys. It's going to be a little hard for you to see, but hopefully we can kind of run through piece by piece. I wasn't able to find a scan of the schematic, but I did find this photo of a scan of the schematic, and that's the best I could do. I know there are other schematics floating around online for the AC10 SRT, but they have errors in them, several errors in them. So this one, basically what I read online seemed to be the closest, and I can confirm it is dead on what the AC10 SRT should be based off of what I see in this amplifier. So you'll note there's lots and lots of marks on here. Green check mark meaning it's there, it's correct. Red meaning there's some question to it, there's some element I want to note for myself. So I think what we'll do is just go through from the input side all the way down through the circuit, and I'll touch on everything that's really noteworthy. And we'll pull up the schematic and kind of do both side by side, at least try to. Let me zoom in a little bit. So starting with the input jacks here, we've got 268Ks right here. That is correct. And then you can see we have a 1 meg here. So if I look over here on the schematic, you can see 268Ks and a 1 meg. The way it's wired up, I don't fully understand whether this is the same or not. What it should be is a 68K here, a 68K here, and then a 1 meg between them, basically, are coming off of the connections off of both of them. So you got kind of a V, V, and then a 1 meg going to the ground here. And instead what you have are the 268Ks off of the 2 poles of this, and then you've got the 1 meg connecting this pole to this pole through there, and then it's going up to the ground bus wire just off screen, which you can't really see. So yeah, it might be exactly the same. It's just for some reason throwing me off the way it's wired here. What I can say is by playing the amp that this input is lower output than this input, and that's about all I can say about that. Moving on, the real big discovery was the missing cathode bypass cap. So off of pin 8 for V1, which is this blue wire right here. So this is pin 8, and it goes over here, and there's a 1.5K, which you probably can't really see, just hidden right here. And that is right here. So you got pin 8, this 1.5K, and there is a missing 25 microfarad cathode bypass cap right here. So what does that do? Well, I actually subbed one in just out of curiosity. I know what a cathode bypass cap does, but I was curious what it would sound like in this amplifier, and it does exactly as you expect: more gain, more output. Yeah, so in this case, you know, it's a bit perplexing to me why the previous tech would have not included that. They replaced the other caps. You got a cathode bypass cap here, another one here. So it must have been a conscious decision not to do that. And what I can say also is I played the amp as it is currently, and it sounds great. It does not have as much gain as it would if it had one there, but it is actually better for lower volume, I would say. It sounds better at lower volumes than with the cathode bypass cap in there. However, we will almost certainly be adding one back in. So that's kind of the first big note difference there. And then moving on, all of these caps are correct. All of that looks really good. Everything in this area is correct. All the resistor values are correct. There is this lead right here off of pin 2, which is connected over here. See pin, oh, sorry, it goes down here. This is kind of interesting part of the schematic. You can see this. So you've got one half of the first preamp tube and the other half of the first preamp tube. The first half of the first preamp tube is actually dedicated to the trem circuit, which is kind of unique and not what I was expecting when I was visually looking at the amplifier. And so this wire right here is green wire. It's kind of just tack soldered on top of the tag here instead of through the hole of that. So I need to redo that. So just a small note for myself there. But everything checked out on the trem side of the circuit. It all looked good to me. The only real note I have is in playing the amplifier and just testing it real quick. It's got kind of an odd behavior on the depth where basically it's very subtle kind of through here. And then once you get about halfway, it all of a sudden gets very, very deep and fairly choppy. And then up from there, it just gets kind of crazy, you know, almost bit crusher kind of sound. It sounds very cool, but just I'm guessing that's probably not the correct behavior for it, but I'm not really sure why that is since all of the components seem correct. So just a little note there. And also another note, which is kind of funny, the speed is wired in reverse. So actually the slowest is all the way up. So just a little note there. But moving on, sticking with V1 here. So yeah, we're missing a cathode bypass cap, which is a big deal. It's going to change the gain structure of the amp and the tone a good amount. Also off of V1, it goes up here to the volume pot, which has been replaced. And it seems to, you can't measure this in circuit without lifting one of these legs here. I don't think I'm getting kind of an odd reading, so I need to do that and make sure it's the correct value potentiometer there. But just in playing it, it seemed to be totally fine, but we want to confirm that. Moving on here, some other notes. So see this cap right here? There's 3 of them. This is a kind of another big thing I noticed. Obviously, these are not factory, but I was a bit confused because I found a couple photos of other AC10 SRTs and they don't have these caps here. Now, just looking at them, 33 microfarad, 350 volt, you would think these would be like the main power supply caps, but there is this can cap here, which is the original, and I did actually lift it up and pull it out to be able to read it as a triple 16 microfarad, 300 volt capacitor can cap here. So this is still in circuit, it's still wired up. Now it looks like to me that these 3 are all wired in parallel with the 16 microfarad connections of this can cap. So basically what that means is you are adding the 2 together, 33 plus 16. So basically you have 50 microfarad, triple 50 microfarad can cap essentially, based off of how it is wired currently. Why you would do that, I don't really know. It seems like a lot of extra filtering, and I'm the kind of guy that likes the 16 microfarad, just like I have in my AC30. Just gives a little bit of a different sound, some more ghost notes, makes it a bit more interesting to me. So yeah, I think what we'll probably do is obviously test it, make sure it's healthy with it in, and then pull them out and see what it sounds like and see if this cap seems healthy. I doubt it is, so we'll probably end up replacing this with 3 16 microfarad caps and then just getting rid of these in total. And that's kind of it for this first preamp section. Not a whole lot to talk about. In fact, let me do this real quick and show you guys one note here of what the tubes do in this amplifier. So V1A, this is actually incorrect. V1A is actually the vibrato oscillator, and V1B is the initial gain stage. So the first few pins here, pin 1, the plate of the first preamp tube, so that would be V1A plate. That is part of the trem circuit, not the initial gain stage. It's the second half of the 12AX7 here. That is, so this is actually incorrect. So you've got vibrato oscillator, you've got gain stage, and then V2 is also gain plus reverb, V3 is reverb, and then V4 is your phase inverter. So yeah, let's go back over to our schematic here and see anything else noteworthy. So again, we got those 33 microfarad caps, these 3 here that were added in parallel, as far as I can tell, with the 16 microfarad caps. One interesting thing on this schematic is you can see it's this 12AX7, or in this case 12AU7. It's 1, 2, 3 pins, 1, 2, 3, and then they you can see they crossed out 6, 7, 8 and wrote 1, 2, 3 again. So I don't know why they did that, way back in 1964. Because this is 6, 7, 8 according to how this amplifier is wired. So just a little note there. And you'll see one change here as well. So this is V3B, and there's this right here, this 1 meg carbon comp, which was added in this connection right here, which is pin 7. This is the gray wire that goes all the way over here. Follow this along, goes all the way over here to this end of the spring reverb. So this was added in. I'm not really sure why or what this is doing, perhaps to just quell the reverb, stop it from oscillating, maybe something along those lines. But this was obviously added in and not on the schematic. Continuing on here, the only other really noteworthy things were the grid stop resistors here. So these are off of pin 2 of the EL84s, which is the control grid. These are the only 2 original resistors left in the amp besides the 1K you see right here. Zoom out a little bit. So this is original to the amplifier, and then you got this carbon comp right here, and then you've got a carbon comp hidden. You can see it just right there. So those are both 4.7Ks. However, this one measured 7.6K, and then this one measured 5.2K. So those are both imbalanced, and we will just go ahead and replace both. Might as well. Since everything else has been replaced and those are a good bit out of tolerance, but the 220Ks are totally fine, and these coupling caps, really important for the amplifier, are fine as well. You can see another cathode bypass cap here. There's different brands. It's kind of a mixture. different brand here, different brand here. Can't see this one. And then these are different brands. So it's a bit of a hodgepodge, if you will. There's just a couple other little small things. So here's your bias circuit. So you got a 130 ohm bias resistor and then your bias cap. I mentioned how dinky and small it looked, over here. Zoom out. And that is correct, a 25 microfarad. That's confusing me because I think my AC30's bias cap is like 220 microfarad. It's way larger. And then this bias resistor, it doesn't say what wattage rating it is, but it looks fairly small, maybe a 5 watt or something. But this is 135 ohm. Schematic says 130. You can see that there. But when I checked the bias, I think I mentioned this already on video. When I checked the bias, it was biasing around 75, 76% with 119 volts from the wall. So we're going to have to change this and just experiment with some values to see what will get us closer. I did try some other E84s as well to see if it was tube related, just the tubes were really weak or something, and they weren't. They all biased basically the same. So we'll replace this cap as well at the same time. And then the only other thing here, so we got this can cap. This is a Weber replacement, and this is a dual 50, whereas the schematic calls for a dual 32. Not a huge deal there, but just noteworthy. And the only thing left to mention is the fuse. So the fuse here for 245 volt shows it should be a 3 amp. Now, if I understand it correctly, it should be, well, the one in it is a 1 amp. I think it should be a 1.5 or a 2. I might have to double check on that, but we can replace that, no big deal. And that really covers it. Honestly, looks really good. I'm really, really pleased, actually. I was a little nervous, just based off of seeing how much was done to it. If there was going to be some secret hidden mods, I was afraid I wasn't going to be able to find a good schematic for it as well. So again, hey, shout out to you, Matt. Thank you for providing the schematic for me. And yeah, I feel really good, and I know next steps. So I think what we'll do is just play with the bias first, and then once that's set and it feels stable and good, then we can experiment with, removing the caps, replacing the caps, and things like that. So really, really happy with the progress so far. Let's pick it up tomorrow. We've got the cathode bias set up out of the amplifier now. We're not sure what's going to be the right value resistor to get this thing biasing correctly. So I've got a couple we can sub in, and then once I know what the value is, I'll go ahead and buy a higher quality resistor to do it. So we've got 110. Again, reminder, the original was 135. So this is a 110, which will give us a hotter bias. This is a 120, slightly cooler bias or slightly hotter bias from the original. And then this one is just a straight 100. So I think 100 might be a bit too much. I think 120 might not be enough. So I believe 110 is probably going to be the good starting point. So we're only going to temp it in because I very well could have to pull it out immediately, or it will be pulled out in short time with a different one to get the value correct. So I'm not too worried about getting it installed perfectly because it's not going to be permanent. Well, I got to be honest, I'm a bit surprised going from 130 ohm, 133 ohm, whatever it was, down to 110 ohm. We only gained just a little bit. We went from about 75% to 80%. I don't know if you can see that or not. Let me focus it. So we went to about 81% plate dissipation per tube. So very, very little change actually. So it looks like we're going to have to go quite a bit higher, or rather lower resistance, maybe 70 ohm, 80 ohm, something like that. Kind of interesting. So, okay, this is why we test. We're getting there. I will note that the plate voltage seems quite low. And I don't know why that is exactly. According to the schematic, if I remember correctly, it was expecting something like 295 off of the plates. And we're getting 260 range. So quite low, actually. Let's go ahead and check what the heaters are. So checking the heaters, and we're getting 6.5 volts AC, which is well within the tolerance range at modern wall voltages. So everything seems okay there, but again, we're still getting some low plate voltage. So I'm not really sure why that is, but that is a good sign. Got more to look into. So I'm measuring the HT voltage right now, which is pin 9, the screens, and we're only getting 277 volts. The schematic thinks it should be about 300 volts Again, we are, that the schematic is for the European voltage, not what we have here, but it is lower than I would expect. I know there's also a range. It's never, perfect. There's a tolerance level there. Just something to know. I'm not really sure why that is the case. I guess we can see what we're getting for the wall voltage here. Let's see what we're measuring at the fuse. 119, 118.9. So it is a bit cooler than normal, but still I would expect more. I decided to just go for the 75 ohm. I'm not even sure that's going to be enough, to be honest. Yeah, I don't know. Something's not right. We're not getting enough plate voltage here. That's only 87%. 87.5. The plate voltage is just way too low. Why is that? I'm really not sure. I decided to check the voltage coming out of the rectifier here as kind of the source point, right? Going from the power transformer to the rectifier, then that's what's sending the DC out to the rest of the amplifier. The schematic shows 390 volts coming off of pin 3 here. And I'm connecting pin 3 and we're getting about 366 volts. So I'm not sure if that's down to the rectifier or if it's the power transformer is just not giving us much juice. Again, we're not, full wall voltage, but it's a bit confusing because this setting right here is for lower wall voltage than what we're getting right now. So you'd think it would be higher, but it's not. So what I'm going to do is pull the power tubes, see what I'm getting with no load on it, and then we'll go from there. I do have another one of these EZ81s in my other Vox AC10, so we can pull that and see if that helps or not. I just really want to get to the bottom of this and make sure it's not an issue with the power transformer. Well, I was getting ready for bed and I just could not take it. I had to see for myself if I swapped the rectifier tube with another one, if that did any change. So my AC10, like I said, has an EZ81. I grabbed that. It's a vintage EZ81. Here's the original that was in this amplifier. It's an Amperex. The one in there is a made in Holland, also vintage tube, a nice tube. And I just checked the numbers. I can show you real quick. And it really didn't make any significant difference. We're getting about 7 volts DC across the cathode resistor, just like we were before, and plate to cathode voltage was in the 230 range, 233, 234, 236, something like that, 236. So it's basically exactly what it was before. So we're still 88% plate dissipation, somewhere in that range. So I'm fairly confident it's not the rectifier. And in my mind, the only thing left, it could be because the power transformer readings seem to be okay. So I think the power transformer, I'm guessing it has to be okay. So that kind of just leaves really, I guess, the filter caps. So maybe there's this old filter can cap in here, this original one. Maybe this one has just failed and it's causing issues downstream. So that's all I can think of. All right, we'll pick this up tomorrow. All right, it's been a hot minute since I've filmed anything with this amplifier. It's just been sitting as I've been waiting to hear back from the dealer so that I can give you guys the update and I can finally move forward. So really long story, semi-short. I didn't want to do any work to the amp because I purchased it from a big vintage dealer in New York, Retrofret, if you're curious. And, this amp obviously has some problems with it. It's the plate voltage is quite low. It's biasing quite cool. I tried to experiment just as a quick, test proof of concept. I put in a 75 ohm bias resistor here. The stock value is 135, and it still did not bias as you'd expect for a cathode biased amp, even with a much smaller resistor. And the plate voltage is super low, obviously, because those have an inverse correlation with each other. So yeah, it's been kind of frustrating trying to go back and forth with the dealer a little bit. I have the advantage of being much more informed on this stuff than the average consumer. I can speak the language. I was able to test these things. A lot of vintage dealers, retrofit included, they only give you 48-hour approval period. And realistically, buying a vintage amp like this, you receive the amp, you got 48 hours to get your tech to look at it, to give it a once over. Most techs are far too busy to be able to just take in something within 48 hours notice and look it over. So it's just not realistic, but I'm an exception because obviously I am my own tech. I went to the dealer before doing any, work that couldn't be undone, and just to hear what they had to say, because I want to keep this amplifier, but I paid a premium for it. I purchased it under the assumption it needed no work based off of their own advertisement saying that it was worked on by their tech, the caps were replaced by their tech, and it was biased correctly, which I know all of that is incorrect. And how I know that is actually found previous photos of this amplifier back in the UK where a tech in the UK had done the recap in it. So the only thing I could tell that Retrofret did to this amplifier was the USA 3-prong cord here. As far as I could tell, that's the only thing they touched, which is not what they said in their ad. So I don't know, moving fast. I give them a little bit of the benefit of the doubt, but I had that in my back pocket as kind of the leverage point if I needed to. But I didn't lead with that. I basically said, hey, this is what I'm seeing. I think the amp needs some work. Let me know what you think we should do as next steps. I also did find somebody that owns this exact same amplifier, and they posted some voltages on their end, which were more what you'd expect. So that kind of further gave credence to the fact that this amp needed some love. Eventually, it took a bit. I was able to get a hold of their tech, so they requested I talk to their tech, who again, they were saying that, this is not on them. They're not going to cover the work that it needs. I talked to the tech. He was a bit dismissive at first, of course, but eventually, as we talked, it was clear that he understood over time that I understood what I was talking about, and he started to see what I was saying and eventually agreed with me that there is something wrong, and kind of some of my hypotheses he thought could be it. He also admitted that they did not do the recap. The amplifier came this way, and so I felt like I was being taken advantage of a little bit as a consumer. Again, if I didn't know all of these things, I would have been, it would have been tough. So my approach was basically, I just want the parts covered and the labor covered to get it right. That was my only goal. I basically gave them a list of the parts I thought it needed that should have been replaced or covered by them. I'm having them cover that, and then I gave it to their tech to decide what the labor charge should be. I basically said, I will, accept whatever he deems as a fair value for him working on the amp if he were to work on it. And so that's what we did. They gave me that number. I agreed to it, and did not get any pushback or anything. I'm trying to be fair here. And so that's where we're at. So now, all of that to say, and I just want to say real quick too, their tech was great to talk to on the phone. He seemed like a really nice guy. I think they had a slip up on their end. They should have recapped it. This is an original cap in the amplifier. It's still in circuit. So they added in, the tech in the UK added in these caps, but this cap is still in circuit actually. So this could be our problem right here. It could be as simple as that, and they acknowledge that should have been fixed. So anyways, no desire to badmouth their tech at all. Seemed like a really nice, very smart guy. But that was just my experience. I want to be transparent with that. So with all of that said, I ordered the parts since they refunded me that money, and they're here now, and I've got the green light. I also told them too, you guys can wash your hands of this. I'm not going to come back to you with any further complaints or anything. If this doesn't fix it, it's on me. I'm totally fine with that. So we've got the parts in it. Now we can start finally working on this thing and getting it ready. I'm so excited to dive into this amplifier. This has been a dream of mine to own for a while, and I'm sure there's nothing major going on. It just needs basically I'm going to do a full recap of it, and that should hopefully get the bias better. And then we've got a new rectifier tube as well in case the rectifier it came with is super weak. And yeah, I'm sure we'll get it dialed in. So let's go ahead and dive in.